3, 2.
Welcome to Westchester Jewish Community Services. As a leading agency in providing a comprehensive spectrum of human services, we have been helping people since 1943. We serve all people in Westchester County, regardless of age, income, or ethnicity. We provide a wide variety of essential and dynamic services that make a difference in people's lives. Children, teens, adults, and senior citizens are served by our network of programs located throughout the county. When people come to us for assistance, they become part of the WJCS family. Our highly trained and skilled staff focus on you and your family and are committed to becoming your partner in finding solutions. For more than half a century, we have been connecting people to services that help them overcome mental, physical, or emotional challenges. WJCS is here in your community when you need us.
Welcome to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is funded by UJA Federation, United Way, government grants, private individuals, foundations, and corporations. When a child has become a problem at home and at school, when dangerous behaviors threaten a child's safety and the community, when a parent is concerned and afraid, where does a family turn? The alphabet of social services can be daunting. DSS, DCMH, OMRDD, DOH. Most people don't know how to begin to get the help they need. Fortunately for Westchester County residents in 10 communities, an innovative system of care is available to coordinate the services that may be needed to make a difference for a child with emotional and behavioral challenges. Tonight we will take a look at some of the elements in this extensive network for children and families, and we'll look at how integrated services planning can improve access and outcomes for parents and families with troubled children. The guests in our first half will be Michael Orth, who is a program coordinator. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
For Children's Mental Health Services at the Department of Community Mental Health in the county. Carol Hardesty, welcome Carol, who is Executive Director of Family Ties, and Debbie Lightbody, who is a parent in the Family Ties system and a member of the board. In our second segment, we will look at 2 WJCS programs which are among the points of entry that identify and refer families to the network system. So let's begin, Michael, with a little bit of an overview of this very unique and collaborative partnership. How did it begin, and where did this idea of connecting everybody get started?
Well, Westchester Children's Services embarked on this journey several years ago, 10, 12 years ago, and it really came about a change in values, a change in how we work with families. So over 10, 12 years ago, our family support organization partnered with government, and we really try to do the way things we do business.
One of the goals of this, I understand, is to replace hospitalization for children with psychiatric issues. How does this come about? How do you, that's a pretty lofty goal, and I understand that when it got started, Myra Alfreds and some of the others were looking at an increase in hospitalizations for very young children.
I think it really started with listening to families and the parents and really having them tell us what they wanted and what kind of resources and supports they could use to keep their youngsters at home, out of hospitals, and out of residential. So again, the families kind of drove the system and gave us a sense of what programs and resources they needed. Out of that really came the system of care model, and trying to tap into community supports, family supports, recreation, respite, to be able to maintain, whenever possible, a kid in the home.
When you talk about system of care, what becomes involved in that?
And I'm also going to refer to my colleague, Carol Hardesty, who is actually one of the founders of the system of care in Westchester County, along with Myra Alfreds. The system of care is really, the definition is how we organize our system, core values that really drive our system is sort of a philosophical approach. But the basic core values are that families and communities have strengths that we're going to be building on, that families should be driving the planning, that whenever possible it should be community-based, that it's culturally competent, reflective of what the family's needs are. So all of those drive our system of care, but it's really a way of organizing our system and working with families.
So this is a philosophical construct, and I think that these are quite lofty principles. How are they actually implemented? How do you go about making sure that these ideals really work for a family?
I think that partnership between the family and government and professionals can't be overemphasized. Every single opportunity is taken for that partnership to come about. Parents get to be involved at the planning level. They sit on every planning council. They are involved in decision making at every single level of government in Westchester. And that's really unique. That's something that doesn't exist everywhere else. We made early decisions to do that way back in the early 90s. We made very conscious decisions for parents and government to partner together. We play that out every single day. Parents are involved in evaluation efforts for the system of care. They are involved in program planning, service delivery. They sit on planning councils, as I've said, and that's really the core that drives our system.
So this is, I have a copy of this flow chart, and it seems like it works both up and down. It comes from the top down and then works from the parent and back up. And you've managed, I think, very uniquely to break down the barriers between bureaucratic systems, or at least that's part of the goal. How does that actually work?
Well, I guess I'll answer that first. I think what Westchester, as Carol mentioned several years ago, in the mid to late 80s, we developed what we call a community development model called Network. And it's really a way of helping communities throughout Westchester County to organize and to better coordinate services at a direct community level. And typically a network will include school districts, mental health clinics, recreation, family support. And we invite families who have children who experience different stressors to come to a meeting. They get to select who they would like at their meeting. We approach it from a strength-based perspective, what the child and family does well, what the community has to offer. And rather than always focusing on the deficits, we like to focus on the possibilities. And this model has been infused throughout Westchester County. And the issues that are addressed and that the families discuss at the network meeting really help to drive our policy and our program development. So that's the communication that exists at different levels in our county, but it all starts from the family voice.
It both simplifies things for the family and increases the possibility for the family. The family would not have access to all of the services, all of the systems. I mean, it's just so complex, it's hard to really get your hands around without this kind of help. And it's been an amazing thing for families to have this happen.
So that a family that comes in through the Department of Social Services or the Department of Community Mental Health, it doesn't really make a difference. They're still referred into this network system, and they present their case. And when you say they can select who they want there, what are their choices?
Well, one of our goals is really to try to tap into the natural family resources, and that could include relatives, someone in the faith community, a baseball coach who really has worked well with this youngster, and obviously we also try to tap into some of the formal resources like mental health services, education, and perhaps social services. It's the families meeting. We don't refer a family to network, we invite a family to network because it's really their meeting and it's their forum to let us know what their needs are and what their challenges are.
They invite others, and yet we'll help them invite people who we know can be good resources for them at the meeting.
Now, we talk about family, but it's not always the traditional family. Tell me how that works. It's not always, two parents and a child.
That's right. It can be a grandparent, it can be a foster family, it can be an adoptive family, it can be when it's a teenager sometimes who's living alone. They can choose who might be at that meeting. It might be their family of origin, and it might be other people.
So these are people who are likely to be involved going forward in working toward a care plan or some sort. How does that work? What comes out of a network meeting?
We call that a wraparound plan. And literally, we
Wraps
try
around.
to wrap services around that family. Those services include anything that can really be helpful, anything that the community has to offer, and if the community doesn't offer it, we try to invent it. Our attitude is to never give up on a family. If something isn't working, well, we'll try something else. And if it doesn't exist, well, maybe we need to make it exist. We need to create it for that family.
Step back just a tiny bit, because I guess part of the funding from this, or all of the funding, has come from a federal grant. How does this work?
Well, the actual system of care design, or the network process, started back in the early 80s. And the network philosophy really doesn't involve any funding. It's really a community making a commitment to work in a particular way. So we've had networks in existence prior to the funding. In 1993, New York State initiated something called the Coordinated Children's Services Initiative, which really also helped to develop some of the system of care principles and values that I had mentioned previously. The different county departments do have their own funding streams. In mental health, we have something called Community Reinvestment that helps to support the Family Support Organization, some of our case management programs, and respite. And then, as you mentioned, in 1999, Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health received a SAMHSA grant, which really helps to support system of care work and has provided additional supports for family support, respite, and the network process.
So this federal money is a 6-year grant, I understand. And how will that work? How does that work in terms of funding agencies, family ties, and the county?
Yeah, and before that even, I think it's really worth mentioning that it was an honor for Westchester to receive this grant. There's only a handful of grants that exist throughout the country, and Westchester happens to be the second grant in New York State to receive this grant. So when we applied for the grant, and Carol was actually the author of the grant along with Myra Alfreds, they really had to prove that there was a real structure in place already, and that there were agencies like WJCS who had a belief and a value system that matched the system of care values.
We were also the #1 ranked grant in the nation the year that we won the grant.
So some of the good work that agencies like WJCS, like Family Ties, are doing, the grant helps to continue that and provide additional resources and supports for families who enter our system of care.
One of the things that the SAMHSA grant helps us to do is really to connect to a broader social justice movement for families across the country. And I think that we see that in so many other ways now. Not only is mental health involved in trying to empower families and work at the community level, keep youngsters in their own home schools and communities, but education is trying to do that, and social services is trying to do that. So we really have new partners as the work goes on, and that's very encouraging for us.
I think that was very interesting when we spoke earlier in the week, this social justice model and the idea of children's rights. Again, how does this system go about promoting the rights of families and children?
Really lets them have the right to self-determination. When families are involved at every single level, when they get to be involved in policy development and help plan the very programs that they will participate in, and get to participate in local community planning and get to be part of an evaluation process, they really are part of the system. They really are driving the system. And as that idea spreads from system to system, and when you think about the power of it, to have successful families who might have kids that otherwise would not be considered successful. That's a powerful thing.
Let's take a look at Debbie and get a live example of how a family has actually used this system. Debbie, you want to talk about your experience? You've had 2 children,
Right.
one who went through the system, one who didn't. Can you
Right.
talk about the benefits for you as a parent of hooking into this very complex network?
Well, certainly when you find you have a child like this and it develops over time and it gets more and more serious, you become very isolated in your community. And you also become quite desperate because finding help can be very difficult. It's a maze of different programs, it's a maze of different ideas, and you really don't know what's appropriate for your child. And you're grasping at straws quite often. I came into Family Ties through the network that the school system called for me. And Michael was actually the moderator and listed the strengths. And by this time, I wasn't sure we had any strengths, so it was a very new concept because you have a lot of blaming and people don't understand what's going on, and there's some people don't, other children, they don't want their children to associate with yours because yours are quite often in trouble. So when I met a person from Family Ties, it became literally a lifesaver to me. And it was a window and a door into many, many programs. And I've had the advantage, my one son has had the advantage of really having that wraparound. And it's like a security blanket that just wraps around them. And it doesn't mean that they're always healthy and they don't maybe have to go into the hospital, or they might have to go to residential for a period of time, but they're always coming back to the community. And we've had Jobs Plus help him get a job, and he was successful at a job for a year. I mean, we've had caseworkers that come to the house and speak to him and have managed to make out forms which become government forms are just overwhelming to a parent who's trying to hold on to a job and do other things, have a life at the same time. And they've managed to get him disability, and they've done a lot of wonderful things for him. And even though he got ill again, he's getting better now. And I know I can just pick up the phone and they can tell me how to get to the hospital, which is the best place for him to go, what to do when he comes out. Is there a half-day program? Will he go back? He'll go back to a caseworker again and start over again, as we all do many times.
Right.
But he comes back with more knowledge about himself.
So this isn't a one-shot deal. Network is, it can be the beginning. And then what's the follow-up? How often do you reconnect? I think one of you said that the parents are the ultimate case managers.
That's right.
That's very true.
That's right. And there's an ongoing support circle usually around the family. The family at a network meeting chooses the people who are most likely to be able to help them over a long period of time. That support circle can change as the child and family's needs change, but they continue to meet and continue to offer families the support they need to cope with whatever comes along.
We also have group meetings with other families that are in the same position, which is a wonderful place to share information. When you go there and someone comes in and you can tell that they're very upset and life has been really very difficult for them, and they say they want to send my child to a school, well, there's usually 2 or 3 people at the table that can say, I know that school, my child went there, this worked for me, or maybe you don't want to take that school, try again. So it's really a community of knowledge for all of us, and it's very comforting. It's a place to go to laugh, to cry, to just say, someone can say to you, oh, my child did that too. You don't just feel so strange.
We've even worked on having some retreats for
wonderful.
others. Yeah.
The retreats are wonderful.
You mentioned the retreat from others.
Yes.
And how that really alleviates some of the isolation.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're talking about also is that every plan is individualized based on what the family wants and what their needs are, and it's not a cookie-cutter approach. It'll look different for each family, and it's really not up to the family, but up to the professionals and the community to be flexible and to adapt the services to meet the needs that you're presenting to us. So it kind of puts some of the change on us as professionals, not try to fit families into certain.
We also do some education for the parents too, which is very helpful. I mean, we did a whole course on mental health and all the different bipolar, schizophrenia, all the different things and the medications, and that's very helpful in understanding the person that you're living with.
Yeah, is this the family group conferencing that you're talking about, or is that a different aspect?
That's a little different. What Debbie is talking
Right.
about is really very personal for the families. Family group conferencing might happen at our network meetings or a network-like meeting. It's a way of helping the family to make decisions for themselves in a very guided way, but in a way that puts them in the empowered position. And it's very strength-based, comes up with a plan that the family wants. Professionals don't make the decisions, families make the decisions about their own situations.
Right, right. I guess that someone can come through any number of doors, but you have a policy of a single point of entry. And what does that mean? I think, you know, you see some of these things on charts, and you see some of that.
Single point of entry is only for residential care. You can really come in any door to network.
Okay.
You can come in through mental health, social services. You can knock on the door yourself if you're a parent. Anybody can come to network. Once the youngster's needs rise to a level of possibly needing residential care, Westchester County tries to do this in a way that makes sense for families and tries to look at all the opportunities for families to really keep their kids at home if possible and look at it across systems so that social service, mental health, probation, none of us are sitting there saying, well, these are my resources. Everybody's resources are on the table, and we try to figure out how to avoid placement and how to make the best placement possible if one is needed.
Now, the kids who come into this system, what kinds of issues do they come with?
Well, I think when it comes to network, we see kids with many different issues and challenges. It could be experiencing problems with relationships at home. It could be their own mental health issues. It could be challenges at school. So they really come with a variety of issues and different challenges. I think what the need, it's come to the level where they need the support of more than two resources or two systems. So they've exhausted the traditional outpatient clinic, they've tried working with the school, and they need a much more holistic wraparound approach. So those are the youngsters and families that typically come to a network meeting.
And these children could have substance abuse issues.
Absolutely.
They could have juvenile justice issues that can come from any of those angles,
Yes.
I gather. Who is responsible for making sure that the family is following through on the plan that is established?
I'm thinking about that as you're saying it because it's like that's a little different emphasis. That's sort of the traditional emphasis on who's responsible for making the family do something. We try to do it a little differently and put the family in the driver's seat. We offer the help that we can. We try to make sure that we're responsible as a network community for offering all of the resources that can be given to a family. One person in the support circle will usually take responsibility for being in the lead, but we try not to impose things on families. They still have things imposed on them by other systems. They might have a probation officer who has something that's legally required, or a CPS worker, or there might be something that the school is imposing on them. But that's a little different than our network approach. We want as much as possible for families to be empowered and for us to be seen as helpers in that process.
I think most of the parents I've met, their goal is to have a healthy and happy child. And I don't think anyone has to make them do that. The people I've met are very enthusiastic and are just really working as hard as they possibly can to do the best for their children.
And I think because the parents are actually driving the network meeting and really letting us know what they need, that they'll actually take an ownership of the plan.
Right.
It's their plan. It's not my plan or Carol's plan or the school's plan. It's the parents' plan.
So, in a sense, the professionals step back a little bit and allow the families to drive the process themselves.
That's right.
Now, you are operating 10 networks. You want to talk a little bit about where those are?
Sure.
And,
There are currently 10 community networks. Mount Vernon was the original network, and it started actually in 1979. We also have a network in New Rochelle, Portchester, the Ossining Tarrytown community, the White Plains community in Greenberg. help me out, Carol, Peekskill, Bedford, Lakeland, and Eastchester.
Oh, you
Was that
did that well.
And what's interesting is they're all reflective of their communities. Each network follows the same principles and values, but are really geared more towards the needs in the community and the service providers in the community. The networks are all co-chaired by people who work in the community, who work for different agencies like WJCS, and they make a commitment to work in this way. So it's, again, a real community development model.
But if your community doesn't have a network, that doesn't mean you get left out of the whole process. If you want to have that kind of wraparound planning meeting, we'll come to your community and do it for you there.
Oh, I see. So people don't have to be residents of only
No.
those 10
No.
communities.
That's enhanced because you've really got the community planning together and looking at programs and looking at opportunities in the community. But we'll try to work with anybody, any family who wants to work in this way.
Okay. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I understand that over the last 4 years you've done 400 trainings that really have assured that the county follows through with this. Who are you training and who does your training? I know we'll talk a little bit more about it in the second half. But
Yeah. Well, as Carol mentioned before, our goal was really to infuse these values across the child serving system. I think the nicest part about the training is that they're all done with family support and county government together. So we're working in there as a partnership. We've done several trainings for school districts on understanding the model and how they can implement it in their school building. We do training for mental health clinics, social services, probation, anyone who allows us into their door, basically. And we also do a lot of cross-systems training to have other systems understand the values, the mandates of each other's systems, and how we can better coordinate services for families.
Okay. Carol, I'm going to give you a minute to do a little advertisement for Family Ties.
Well, I would welcome anybody who would like to use the system of care to come into Family Ties. We have support groups in a number of communities. We have resource centers in 3 communities. That would be Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and Peekskill. Families are welcome to have their meetings in any of our resource centers, to come in, to use our library, to use our computers. We'll be happy to work with the family on a one-to-one basis, come to meetings with them, invite them to come to our retreats, to our activities, and then maybe, like Debbie, become part of the board.
And if people want to access that, how do they get in touch with you?
They can call us at 995-5238.
Okay. And Michael, to give you a little, you can give a pitch for DCMH.
Well, again, I think one way that the community get involved is to try to join and be a part of their community network, to learn about the local networks. We have a website, www.westchestercommunitynetwork.com, and they can check out the different resources and the contact people in each of the networks, or they can call me at 995-5225 if they have any other interest in network.
Okay. And Debbie, you're active on the board of Family Ties, and we thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And I guess if there are other parents who have concerns,
Please
they
call.
would get in touch with you through Family Ties.
Right.
I want to thank you all. I understand that you've had 40 or 50 service providers collaborating in each of these communities, and each year you have over 200 meetings. I think you've really been working tremendously, and we're very fortunate in the county to have these kind of resources. So I'm going to ask people to stay tuned for the second half, and thank you for sharing your stories and sharing this information with us. In the second half, we'll be talking about WJCS programs that feed into this network system and feed into the system of care, and how you can use those services through WJCS. Welcome back to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is funded by UJA Federation, United Way, government grants, private individuals, foundations, and corporations. Families in Westchester who experience the stresses that children with serious and complicated emotional and behavioral issues can bring have been finding welcome friends in our county. As we presented in our first half this evening, an elaborate and comprehensive system of care has been spearheaded through the Department of Community Mental Health's Children's Services Division, which seeks to empower families to help design solutions for addressing their own children's problems. Taking responsibility for creating a plan and ensuring that it is followed enables parents to draw upon their strengths and connect with those agencies and community supports that may offer their children a more positive future. WJCS has several programs that work with children at risk or who exhibit problematic behaviors. They work with the families and social workers, psychologists, case managers, become vital resources who both help the children and parents recognize and address difficult issues. They also provide referrals and access to the wider web of supports that exist in our county. On this half, we're going to be talking with two representatives from WJCS programs that are directly involved with the community and with the community mental health system. Carolyn Murphy is the social work supervisor and program coordinator of Family Matters, a WJCS program. Welcome, Carolyn. And Pat Lemp is the director of our Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. Welcome again, Pat. Pat, let's start with you as a representative of someone who comes to this system. Maybe you can first give us a little bit of an overview of what the Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse is so that we set the stage for how this other program got started.
The Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse at WJCS is an umbrella program which involves several specific programs that work to prevent family violence or help families in the aftermath of physical or sexual violence. So we have the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center. We have a specific program that works with domestic violence. We have a program for juvenile sexual offenders. And the newest programs and the programs that are very much a part of the system of care are programs for sexually aggressive youth and youth with specific needs and specific psychological needs who have been sexually abused.
Mm-hmm. So you work primarily with those who are victims of abuse?
We work with those who are victims of abuse, we work with families of those who are victims of abuse, and we work with those who victimize others in an effort towards prevention, because one of the things that the research has shown us, one of the things we know from our own clinical practice is people who sexually abuse children typically don't do it one time. In fact, they do it many, many times, and we know also that often this behavior starts very young. So in working on primary prevention, on stopping offenses before they happen and preventing victimization, a part of our effort is really to work effectively and early on with juvenile offenders, with kids who are exhibiting sexually inappropriate behavior before they become offenders, and with adult incest offenders in essentially minimizing or stopping the behavior and preventing victimization.
Mm-hmm. The program that we're going to focus on tonight is Safety Net, and you had explained that this kind of came out of this network system that we were talking about earlier in the program. Can you describe how that came about and how it developed?
Safety Net is a program for sexually aggressive or sexually inappropriate youngsters or children who have been sexually abused, who have psychological needs beyond those of average children. And we were actually approached by the system of care when in network meetings, in single point of entry meetings, and single point of return meetings, these are the county meetings where children with complicated needs are discussed. Over and over again, they were hearing from professionals and from parents about kids with sexually inappropriate behavior. And as Carol and Michael talked about in the first half, they would try creatively to find solutions, alternatives, programs for these youngsters. And prior to the beginning of Safety Net, the only program in the county for these youngsters was a program through probation, through law enforcement, which was for adjudicated juvenile sexual offenders. So there's a whole pool of kids with problematic sexualized behavior, of families recognizing the behavior and wanting the help, and no specialized program for them, no specialized resources. So when the county recognized this and when parents brought it to the system of care, we were approached because we had the expertise in working with victims of sexual abuse and working with kids who are sexually aggressive, and asked to begin this program called Safety Net, which is a comprehensive program for children struggling with those types of behaviors that I just spoke about.
Now, very often, let's identify the behaviors a little bit, and Carolyn, feel free to pitch in if there's anything you want to add. How do you define sexually aggressive behaviors? And some of these some children are quite young.
That's a good question, because one of the things that we need to recognize is that children have sexualized behavior, and in fact that's normal and healthy. We expect kids to play doctor, we expect kids to experiment at particular developmental stages, like around 4, 5, 6 years of age. What the behavior that we've been seeing that we would define as more problematic or inappropriate behavior is behavior that's beyond normal development, behavior that involves the use of force, behavior in which one of the children is older, stronger, more powerful than the other, behavior that is much beyond, kids normally play doctor, I'll show you mine, you show me yours. This is much beyond that, in that kids are actually forcing other children to perform other specific sexual acts or witness sexual acts. And again, the key is that there's intimidation used, that there's trickery used, that there's force used. It's really not about normal, healthy child development.
You had explained earlier to me that the incidence of this behavior has grown tremendously, which resulted in the need for a program like this. How do children, you deal with children from what ages?
Actually, the youngest child who we have seen with problems with sexually inappropriate behavior was 7 years old, who actually did some very concerning things and premeditated, literally, sexual assaults on other children that he was going to have during a birthday party sleepover. Fortunately, his little brother ratted him out, and so it didn't happen. But it's behavior that can start at a very young age. And yes, in fact...
How do they get these ideas? How does this come to the mind of a 7-year-old?
It's a question that we ask all the time, and I don't know that we're at a point where we know that there's one right answer. I think one of the answers or one of the explanations is, and research tells us, that the most common outcome of sexual abuse of a child is sexualized behavior. Kids, when they don't understand something, they often repeat it. So very young children who have been sexually victimized, which we know happens all too often, and if they don't get help for it, often their way of asking for help or trying to cope with it in their own life is by replicating the behavior in some way. So that's not always the answer, but that's often, that often goes along with it. The other concern, frankly, is we live in a world where kids have access to the internet, where kids have access to video games, where kids have access to MTV, to pornography at the touch of a button, and too often these things become the babysitters for children. So thinking about children who already may be vulnerable, already may have some issues going on, perhaps a lack of supervision, and exposure to these kinds of behaviors or these kinds of activities without supervision is really concerning. I mean, one of the things that a safety coordinator in our program points out consistently is the video games that are out there for kids now. There's a video game called Grand Theft Auto. And the goal of the video game, in addition to stealing cars, is to kill people. You get extended life for killing people.
Unbelievable.
And children are taught in this game that they get extended life if they sleep with prostitutes. So we have kids playing these games and getting rewarded for it by getting extended life in the video game for hours at a time. And, you know, without good role models, without good reality testing, we're very concerned about the long-term impact on children. So, you know, is it a direct cause? I don't think so. I think it's one of the contributing factors to why we're seeing many more kids with problems with sexually inappropriate and sexually aggressive behavior.
Okay, let's turn to the specifics of the program, Safety Net itself. You've mentioned safety coordinators. How does this program actually work to help children and their families cope with these kind of difficult issues?
Consistent with the system of care, the goal here is to work with the families to keep the children in the community, to provide a thorough assessment and along with the family, the support services necessary, not only to keep the child in the community, but to keep that child safe, to keep the community safe, and to focus on the child's strengths, essentially to help the child get back on a positive path. The way that it works is partnering within the entire system of care, and specifically within our program, there's a clinician and a safety coordinator involved with the child. The clinician often does what we would think of as traditional psychotherapy, often very focused kinds of behavioral interventions, helping the child look at the problematic behavior. The safety coordinator works in the community with the child and with the family as a role model, mentor, sometimes parent surrogate, sometimes partner with the parent in terms of doing fun things with the child, taking them to activities, sometimes literally helping the family with the many overwhelming needs that they have and that the kids have, getting them to therapy appointments, structuring activities, doing things in a group, providing role modeling, helping kids learn problem-solving techniques, helping them, looking at what a child is good at and really maximizing that in any way that we possibly can. So it's the safety coordinator and the clinician working as a team on common goals. The primary goal always with sexually aggressive kids being to reduce that sexualized behavior. With kids who have been sexually abused, it's to reduce the trauma, the effects of the sexual abuse. But the bigger goal is working with the family and helping them to appreciate and understand what's happened to the child, support the child through the healing process, and move on.
Okay, I want to come back in a little while to talk about some of the innovative ways you've done that, but I want to turn to Carolyn and talk a little bit about Family Matters. You deal with a different population. What kind of children and what kinds of issues is your program coping with?
I'm not sure our populations are completely different. I think there's a lot of overlap. Family Matters is a mobile mental health program that provides intensive case management as well as intensive clinical services in the community to children and families where at least one of the children is struggling with a mental health issue. We do all of our work in the homes, in the schools, in the communities. I think that it would be safe to say that a number of our children, though, have had issues of sexual abuse, sexually reactive behaviors, and Safety Net was, I think, sorely needed when it came along because we were not specialists in this area and we were often consulting with the trauma center, but it's very helpful to have a program now that is case management oriented specifically for those types of needs. But our I guess our focus is a little larger. We have children with a variety of issues who come to Family Matters.
Right. Now, when you say it's mobile, what does that mean for a family having problems with their child?
It means that we'll go anywhere, anytime, any place. We come to them, we meet them kind of on their turf. And I think that for some of our families that works better. For families who have been described as resistant or not making appointments or those kinds of things, when we come into the home, I think the playing field becomes a little more level, and it's amazing what happens when you come into someone's home. I think that the relationship changes, and you know, those so-called resistant families really are not, and it's just a different way, I think, of working with people. We do a lot of our individual work with kids in their school setting. Sometimes we can't do it at home. for a number of different reasons. So we are often allowed to have space at a school building. We will see children in their after-school program, in their occupational therapist's office, in any situation that works. Basically, it's very individualized for every family and child. We like to do as much as possible in the home, though, because I think we realize that no child is an island, and it's just impossible, I think, to affect change if we're not going to really be in there doing this with the families. So as much as we can do it at home, we really prefer to do that.
Now, can you talk a little bit about how in Family Matters you utilize this network system that we talked about more extensively in the first half of the program?
I think that from the very beginning, all of our referrals for Family Matters come through the larger system. There's a universal referral form that the county has devised. Besides Pat's program and our program, there's a variety of programs. And instead of making separate referral forms for all of those separate programs, there's one universal referral form that people fill out to access any of those programs. And then those referrals come to what's called the single point of accountability, where cross systems, different agencies come together and look at all the referrals and try to figure out, without answering the question, but certainly trying to figure out where's the best match, what's possibly the best match for this family, without, of course, ever making that decision before meeting a family and having a network meeting and talking about what the different options are available to those families. Most, if not all, of our families do have a network meeting first. It's the beginning of the process, so to speak. It's the beginning of their relationship with us. Hopefully, we're at that meeting. But if we're not, we can be at the follow-up meeting, and that's when we're introduced to a family. And whatever plan they've put together in the network meeting, it's our job to kind of follow that through, to find out from the family, what was your plan? What are your goals? And let's start from there. So we, from the very beginning, are involved. And then along the way, we're involved all the time. You mentioned trainings before. There's a system of care orientation that all new case workers and social workers have to attend. So our workers are right at the very beginning involved in that. I think it's an 8-week or a 10-week session. Some of our staff is involved in doing the trainings for those, so not only are we the trainees, but we're the trainers. We often call system players and ask for help, ask for problem solving. It's a daily thing, really, and I can't think of a day that we're not somehow involved in the larger system. And more importantly, I think that we are unconsciously always following those values, those core values. I don't think that the people who come into Family Matters or the larger system have to learn those values. I think they're inherent within us somewhere. We just have a framework for it now. So that's one way we're always in touch with the system of care.
Are you able to go through those values again, or should I?
I think it's,
you don't need to hit all of them.
Yeah, I think, the ones that come up for us are cultural competency, respecting a family, where they are, what their belief systems are, what's important to them. May not always be what we think is important, but understanding that and not letting that be the end of the relationship, but kind of learning together. Always trying to be strength-based. Not saying it always happens, but always trying to remind yourself to be strength-based and to remind yourself what is working. While everything might be falling apart, what was that small thing that worked? And let's find that again, let's get in touch with it again, and let's build on it. Family-driven. We don't go to meetings without a family next to us. We don't make decisions for our families. They are telling us what they want. And then we kind of help them. Yes, we guide them along the way, we give them advice. I think that because we're so entrenched in their lives and their homes, we become far more than a case manager. And we sometimes become part of the family, which is, an interesting dynamic that you don't always have in other programs. But, those are the core values that come. Individualized care. And I think the biggest one that Carol said before is never give up.
Right.
And we have had children who have had to leave their homes and go into a group home situation or a residential. I think what's nice about being able to have a continuum of care and that kind of never give up philosophy is You know, I worked with a youngster for a long time. It became evident he needed to go into a much more structured therapeutic setting. He went. I was involved in his going. I was involved with his treatment plans, and I was actively involved in his discharge, so that when he came back home, he was right back into a case management program and getting those services that were working for him before. And that's the nice part about it, I think. I get phone calls all the time from families that we worked with a long time ago. And I think that's one of the things, the core values that I like, is that never give up.
Right, right. I just want to reiterate for people who are watching that we talk about families, but it's not only just families it's not only the parent and the child that we're talking about. It can very often include the wider network that was discussed earlier. It can be members of the community, members of a faith-based group. And you brought up the issue of cultural competency. How does the differing backgrounds, certainly in Westchester we have so many people who come from any number of places with very different backgrounds. How does this play out when you try to address the network and try to find solutions, help a family find solutions within their own cultures?
I think one of the ways it plays out is by being very mindful and cognizant of that from the point of meeting with the family. So as was discussed before, it's really the family who selects who is part of their support circle or network, and hopefully they have people in their community, perhaps their religious leaders, perhaps other family members, who will help them to feel more comfortable. I think the other thing is within the system of care training that Carolyn mentioned before, there is continuous training on cultural sensitivity. There are many different cultures and ethnic groups represented within the system of care, but not all. But having a sensitivity to and an appreciation for the uniqueness of different cultures, for what makes their culture special, what's important to them, what are the rituals they have, and even, you know, they're so different, there's so many and they're so varied, but recognizing its value, recognizing its significance in the family, and celebrating it, finding a way to celebrate it becomes really important, and I think an important way of beginning to enter the life of a family. I wanted to also just add to what Carolyn was saying before, because I was not born into the system of care as she was, and come from a much more traditional mental health background. But in watching the work that Family Matters does and in learning more about the system of care, the work is just incredible in terms of really moving into the life of these family and the lives of these kids, and appreciating their resilience and appreciating the strength. It's a little bit humbling for a clinician, because it's not so much that we have the answers, but rather that we kind of shine the flashlight in a particular direction and follow their lead. And once they recognize the strength they have and the power they have and the resources they have, you know, it helps us to kind of move into the background more and watch their growth. So it's sometimes just a little nudge and, you know, a boost of confidence that they need in order to get back on track.
Now, I understand that there's a 6-month review and that people come back to the networks and come back to look at whether their plan is working. How do we know when someone has graduated from one of these programs? How do you move someone out? Do you feel that they're healthy enough or that they're ready, their behaviors? We only have a few more minutes, and I want to just give that a sense of.
Yeah, that's another half an hour. That's a very, very individualized question, and so specific to each individual person. You know, I think that we do review all the time. It's not just every 6 months that we do it. We are constantly reviewing. We're with our families all the time, so we're always in the reviewing process, and how's it going, and what do we need to scrap and pick up and try again, and our families will tell us this is not working, or this is great, let's get more of it. So it's an ongoing review. I think that when a family is able to have find their own supports, and a lot of our families don't have that. They come to us and we say, who would you like to invite? I don't have anybody. There's nobody. If we can help them find 1 or 2 people who can be that person, we know that we're getting ready to move on, but I think it's just a difficult question to answer.
Very individualized.
Very individualized. Some kids stay with us 6 months, some kids stay with us for 3 years, and families.
Okay, your program is pretty well located just in one community, is that right?
No,
Or
we're
you
in
draw-
Mount Vernon and Yonkers. That's
Okay.
where we started. That's where we were born. We have grown significantly. We now have an office in Peekskill and serving the northern part of the county, and we're pretty flexible. But Mount Vernon and Yonkers were our main areas, and now we're in the Peekskill, Yorktown, Cortland area.
Okay, so people from northern or southern Westchester can access it. They don't need to be members of that community.
No.
Okay, and you want to tell us how they get in touch with you, Carolyn?
Well, they can get in touch with me at 237-6089. As we stated before, though, the kind of gate to our program is the universal referral process through the Department of Community Mental Health.
So someone really needs to go into that generalized system of care in order to be referred to Family Matters.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And Pat, talk about how someone comes to you.
Generally, for the safety net program, we get cases similarly starting with the universal referral form through the system of care. However, often parents call not knowing what the problem is for their child, and they're welcome to call our program for a discussion of that and for guidance on it and suggestions. And my number is 949-7699, extension 375.
Okay, and I know that you both participate both in training and in helping to keep other professionals up to speed on all the various aspects. So I thank you both for sharing this information, and we hope that knowing that all of these supports out there can help and connect people to all the variety of services really will make a difference. I want people to be aware that WJCS has a variety of programs through which the Department of Community Mental Health and Department of Social Services and OMRDD and all of the various government agencies can refer people, and that we are located in a variety of communities. And if you have any questions or need information about WJCS, you can give us a call at 761-0600. I thank you again, Carolyn Murphy and Pat Lemp, and thanks for all that you do for children and families in our community. Thanks.